Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's eClaims webinar. We ask you to please keep your phone lines muted as we will be using the chat feature to receive your questions today. Please enter your questions throughout the presentation in the chat box located on the right side of the screen. Use the drop-down to send your questions to the panelists. You can also hover over the WebEx tab at the bottom at the top of your screen and click on the chat. Today we will be covering 3.1 news and 3.1 changelog updates. We will also take questions at the end of the webinar. eClaims has some important reminders. January 20th is the last day that flat file submissions can be submitted until 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Web data entry and eCase will be available until January 21st at 5 p.m. And 3.1 go live date is Monday, January 24th. And now I'm going to pass the presentation over to Michael Hunter, who will review some eClaims topics.
Thank you, Patty. We wanted to go over the SHRY sync up, the SU. Briefly, we've had a few questions to our mailbox and also during the onboarding testing regarding the SU, so we thought it'd be a good reminder this month. So the SHRYSU is to be filed when a claim administrator has identified missed, delayed transactions or other data issues and has a need to send the most current value for SHRY data elements to replace any of that missed, delayed information. It's only filed when permission is granted by the jurisdiction per the IAIBC rules. A sender must email eClaims at wcb.ny.gov for approval. When you're sending that email request, claim administrator must include the JCN, the WCB case number, and the claim administrator claim number. We need that information able to authorize that SHRYSU. We'd also ask that you include the reason for the request if it is a first email to us and it has not already been disclosed. The SHRYSU cannot be used when another SHRY maintenance type code can be filed in place of the SU. A good example of that is if you accidentally filed the SHRY EP, employer paid, instead of the SHRY IP initial payment. In that case, the SHRY IP is allowed per sequencing, and that would be filed after the SHRY EP. We would not approve a request to file the SHRYSU in that instance, since it can be fixed with one transaction. That SHRYSU is really the transaction of last resort, where again you have nothing else to file. If the request is not approved, an incoming SHRYSU will be rejected. So keep that in mind when you send a request to us. You'll want to wait until you have the approval back from us. If you include that SHRYSU in the file and it takes us 24 hours to approve your request, it's quite possible your transaction would get rejected in the time between our approval and when you submit that request. Aside from the FREO2, if any other new maintenance type codes are filed against that claim before the sync up transaction is successfully filed, accepted, the transaction would be rejected. So for example, if you requested approval for the SHRYSU and we started your 10-day window for submitting that SHRYSU, and you then tried to file the SHRY CB, change in benefit type, it would be rejected until that SHRYSU is accepted. If the SHRYSU transaction is filed against the claim after the sync up submission time window has elapsed, the transaction will be rejected. So the board allows 10-day window from approval. We will confirm that approval window with you when we email you back, so you know exactly when it will expire. The claim administrator may cancel its request or request additional time to file an SU at any point during the SHRYSU submission time window. So if you decide the SU is no longer needed, you can send us an email and request cancellation early, or you can wait for the 10-day period to expire if you don't have another transaction to file. If you need more time, you would again send an email to eClaims@wcb.ny.gov with a brief explanation why you need that additional time. And if approved, you'll receive confirmation back from us letting you know what that new window will look like for your extension time, whether it's 5 or 10 days, depending on the request from you on how long you need. We also wanted to give a brief reminder to folks regarding compliance. Claim administrators should ensure that the appropriate first report of injury, FROI, subsequent report of injury, SHRY, transaction is filed for every case with a current ongoing payment. This reminder extends to all cases regardless of their age or status, open or closed, with the Workers' Compensation Board. Compliance with this EDI mandate may not be 100% currently, especially in instances where there are ongoing payments in closed cases. The importance of this and the reason we bring this up again as a reminder is not only due to the transfer to 3.1 next Monday, but also many of you may have received email requests from the eClaims team regarding formulary request that was filed. And when we reviewed the file related to that medical portal formulary request, we discovered that no FROIs or SHRYs have ever been filed on those cases. Some of those include CCP cases where there's continuing payments going all the way back to before the EDI implementation in 2014. Failure to abide by this directive may also result in the assessment of penalties against the claim administrator consistent with workers' compensation law and regulations. This can include, not limited to, that $50 penalty for failure to file a form under 25(3)(e). Should you have any questions about what needs to be filed, if a filing is due, you can always email eClaims@wcb.ny.gov, and you can also find additional information on the eClaims Frequently Asked Questions webpage.
Before we conclude today's presentation, I want to make sure you're aware of the methods to stay informed on eClaims news and upcoming engagement opportunities. You can visit the eClaims website at wcb.ny.gov to stay up to date on eClaims news. You can also sign up to receive news straight to your inbox. This is how we will be communicating future engagement opportunities throughout the course of the BIS project. Visit the eClaims site and select WCB notifications within the eClaims overview section. Questions, comments, and feedback on the eClaims EDI R3.1 upgrade can be emailed to eClaims31@wcb.ny.gov. Questions regarding existing eClaims EDI R3.0 should continue to be sent to eClaims@wcb.ny.gov. You can also follow the board on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. A recording of this webinar is going to be placed on our YouTube and eClaims website, as well as FAQs spawned from the questions being asked during this webinar series. So keep an eye out for these resources. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time today.